Okay, and Hannah Beaufort is here, a guest of Jim Bright. Okay, well, I guess we could get started as more people trickle in.
Okay, we're recording now.
Okay. So welcome everyone to the Bloomington Rotary Club's weekly celebration of service, June 2nd, 2020. I'm Aaron Davis, current club president, and it's just great to see everyone here, including some special guests. So I'd like to now introduce Councilman Jim Sims to lead the pledge and provide us with a reflection.
Thank you. I'm unmuted. I will do. When we see the flag, okay. If you please follow me. Yeah. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you all. Part of my reflection, maybe I should say, maybe we should just listen to the words of that pledge again and let that soak in. But I'd like to start off with, first of all, make an announcement. On Friday, June the 5th, there will be a peaceful protest march that will originate in Dunn Meadow, starting at 3 p.m. This will be a peaceful protest march against police violence and brutality, racial discrimination, social injustices, and inequities. There's a variety of speakers. They will march down to the courthouse square. Just wanted to announce that, and I will also say that if anyone plans to attend, please practice COVID CDC protocols with masks, social distancing, and washing our hands and all those sorts of things. So thank you very much. I want to thank Aaron. He asked me today if I would consider doing a reflection, and I think all of us have had a lot of time to do reflections here lately. I will try to be brief. I am really interested in hearing what Attorney Pop has to say today. So I'll be as brief as I can. My reflection today are brief thoughts on the current social conditions of Black and Brown people, and those thoughts have been sparked by the excessive deadly force used by the Minneapolis, Minnesota Police Department in the killing of George Floyd. One thing I'd like to make clear, that is the social uproar at the time, but these social conditions are nothing new. I also expect to be able to utilize our freedom of speech, our constitutional right, and I believe in the rights of peaceful protests. I will also further say that I denounce any associated violence or destruction of property associated with these protests, and I abhor the agitators that are taking advantage of this situation to further their own agenda, which in generally is to aid in the racial divide. So as I further personally reflect, quickly, I tried to pick some words, and those words that I picked, right now I'm feeling in pain, I'm feeling a bit angry, and I am tired. Now, to be in pain, one of the things is we're dealing with a couple of viruses right now. COVID-19 virus, which we're all aware of, and it is touching many of us very, very negatively. It's clear that that virus disproportionately affects the Black and Brown populations. The other virus that we deal with, and in particular, I'm talking about the Black and Brown people in the United States, we're dealing with a disease of institutionalized systemic racist practices that serve to oppress the racial minorities and those in poverty. Now, I make that distinction between the two because the second, the disease, is everything other than some of these acts that we are seeing. The disease itself, the system, is everything else, and all those social ills, the police beatings, the other acts of hatefulness. All those other things I consider to be symptoms of the disease. Now, as I continue to reflect, sometimes I feel anger. I think many of you remember right at about 20 years ago, there was a gentleman named Rodney King that was beaten very badly by the LAPD. It was on video, it was videotaped no less. And I think many of us remember that. The thing that kind of makes me angry with some of that is that the four main officers that actually put the violence on him, one of those was a Black officer as well. All of those officers were acquitted for excessive violence or assault. Now, standing around was about another 20 officers that kind of watched this. Okay, moving on, I could mention the name Trayvon Martin, a teenager who was killed by a neighborhood watch person. And he was acquitted, and his defense was the stand your ground laws. The thing that kind of angers me is that over time, that's been a 20-year span minimum, that there's just been no real change over time in the culture in this country and how we police our citizens. Now, lastly, I said I was in pain, angry, and lastly, I'm tired. Over the last 30 years, I have participated in many community conversations on race, community conversations on race. We've had town halls, we've had forums. We've talked about disparities in law enforcement, racial disparities in law enforcement, community corrections, housing, healthcare, employment. Over time, you just kind of get tired when you work so hard and work with so many concerned citizens, and there are no real fundamental changes, and particularly higher up and broader at other levels of our government and our society. Now, you go through all of those emotions, and the last thing that I felt was I felt encouraged. I'm encouraged because over the years, we've built partnerships and we've had good communications, and we have rallied with folks that I consider to be strong allies to our cause. There is no movement that I'm aware of that can be successful without having dedicated allies. So I am very encouraged and appreciative of those allies. I'm encouraged by the involvement of younger people. They're more racially diverse and more socially conscious, and I think they really care much more. I'm not even so sure I want to say that, but I know they care for fairness. You know, one of the other things I was encouraged by, I used to say I never ever thought that I'd see a Black or brown president elected in my lifetime, and then we elected President Obama, not only once, but twice. You get encouraged because you see other constitutional fights. And I'm reminded of this with some of my same-sex friends who fought for a constitutional change for same-sex marriage. Long, hard fight. Their allies were straight people, and they were successful, but the long, hard fight, and they understand what it takes to fight for social change. I'm further encouraged because I listen to stories of people that I really have great respect. Some of their lived experiences, experiencing the system of apartheid in South Africa that many of you have heard. I am encouraged because a friend of mine shared with me that he was being the first generation college student in his family, which is a walk in life that I share and many of us share, which means he can identify with some of the under the surface feelings that will open up for better communication. The main thing is that ultimately the system that we operate under and have since the founding of our country will have to be reformed, transformed, or dismantled. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how to do it, but I do know in situations like I'm involved now with my fellow Rotarians, where people that I fully believe are treated with respect, treated with equity, and try to do good for the community, that is a great place to start. Thank you all for listening to me today. I look forward to hearing from Attorney Pop. Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you, Rotarian Sins. Thank you.
Welcome.
I'd like to acknowledge our greeters today, Jim Bright, Michael Shermas, Ashley Sullivan, and Katie Beck, and the producers of this extravagant show, Alan Barker and Michael Shermas, roundabout reporter for June, at least the first 4 weeks, Bob Salzberg. And thank you to Alan for the generous use of this Zoom account and his expertise. So we're going to introduce a few guests that may have slipped through, unnoted, starting with Jim Bright. Jim, we have some visiting Rotarians.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. We're pleased to have with us today past District Governor Judy Bush of Bedford. Judy, welcome. We have with us Beverly Teach, President of the Brown County Rotary Club. Always great to have Beverly with us. We have with us former Bloomington Rotarian, now living in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Dr. Raj Hadawi. Raj, so good to reconnect with you. Winning the prize for connecting from the furthest distance, I think, today. It's going to be fellow Rotarian Ray Paler, who's joining us from Hawaii, where it's a little after 6 a.m. Ann and I met Ray in Seoul at the Rotary International Convention back in 2016 and discovered, among other things, that Ray is an alum of Indiana University, received 2 degrees from the School of Education. Ray, aloha and welcome. And finally, we're glad to have with us today an honors student and a recent IU graduate. She just received her bachelor's degree from the media school, and she's a Hutton Honors honoree. Say hello to Hannah Beauford from Libertyville, Illinois. She's also the social media director for Switchyard Brewery, and they make some good product over there, I hear. So back to you, Aaron.
Okay. Ashley and Katie, did you notice any other guests that we didn't recognize?
I think that we got everyone.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I think that I didn't mention Steve Engel, I don't think, who is here, our member. And so greetings for everyone who signed into this meeting, also via phone or internet without video even, or even without a microphone. So we may not see you, but your engagement is deeply appreciated. So welcome. We'll start with the Rotary family. We have one birthday this week, past District Governor Jim Bright, June 5th. Happy birthday.
Thank you, everybody.
And we have some membership anniversaries. This I think is the week of the year that's really pretty crazy. We have a combined total of over 350 years of membership in the club among these members. None other than Bob Salzberg, 32 years. Judy Schroeder, 32 years. Marshall Goss, 33 years. Fred Dunn, 47 years. Kenneth Sparks, who's also an honorary member and a past president, well over 40 years. Winston Schindel, another past president, 38 years. Michael Hoff, 27 years. Tim Thrasher, past president, 39 years. Ron Jensen, 39 years, another past president. And then a future president, Sally Gaskell, 21 years, 17 years of which was with our club. So pretty amazing. I wanted to mention that Steve and Sandy Moberly have just become co-presidents of IU's University Club. And then thanks to all of our candidates on the election day today, especially our fellow Rotarians who are pursuing service above self, representing us in our community. And also Scott Shackelford is delivering a complimentary webinar on securing the Internet of Things this Thursday, June 11th. Rotarians in the news. Tim Jessen had a recent article in HT featuring Rotarian Hal Turner and the Braver Angels organization. And Connie Shackles has a feature in the Sunday HT about Alan Barker and his bringing classical music to rural Indiana communities. So thank you, Connie, and thank you, Alan and Hal. There's a few Rotary Action updates. I'll mention them briefly. Check up on the roundabout for details. As announced last week, the board has voted to establish a diversity fund in our budget, spurred by the generous donation of former member Dr. Raj Hadawi and seconded by other members. We currently have, I believe, $900 in that fund. And anyone wishing to add a donation to encourage membership by people from diverse backgrounds, please send a check to either the Bloomington Rotary Club or the Bloomington Rotary Foundation with diversity mentioned on the memo line. Then thanks to everyone who submitted comments on the plan for restructuring dues and meals. Starting July 1, we will be compiling comments and providing responses in the next week. Thus far, the comments have been very positive on the plan, and many raised issues to be considered after July 1st, during Ashley's term. Okay. Please note that videos of our Zoom meetings are available on YouTube, thanks to Communications Co-Chair Ellen Barker. So please go to YouTube, find Bloomington Rotary, and hit the subscribe button. When we have 100 subscribers, we will have our own URL not for Zoom, for YouTube. Any other thoughts on that, Alan?
No, I will go ahead and put the URL that we currently use in the chat in a moment.
Okay, and perhaps send that to Bob Salzberg.
Right, I'll do that.
I also wanted to mention that we'll have another Rotary Zoom Cafe to socialize on Thursday again, 7 to 8 p.m. And please don't miss our uniquely social club assembly that's coming up on June 16th, where we'll have small group gatherings in Zoom breakout rooms. So that'll be interesting. And also please plan to attend our celebration of service on July 7th, which will celebrate the beginning of Ashley Sullivan's year as president, with the theme of Rotary Opens Opportunities.
And celebrate the wonderful year we've had with Aaron. Let us not
the
forget
crazy
that.
Wonderful year. Thank you. Do we have anyone who's happy enough to give some dollars? The members and guests, what are you happy about? Please send in happy dollars. You can send in a check or make arrangements to send money to Teachers Warehouse for the happy dollars that you have accumulated over these almost 3 months that we've been meeting online.
I have a couple of happy dollars. Can you hear me?
Martha, yes.
Yes. The first one is for the various people who are not with us today because they are working at the polls. The second one is sort of a sad dollar, which is for the people in Minneapolis on Lake Street whose businesses and houses and so forth were destroyed. And I feel a close connection with that because my daughter works with a law firm, which is a half block off of Lake Street, right next to the post office that was burned, a block away from the police precinct that was burned down. And their building is the only building on their block that was saved because Pastor Romero wrote on it, immigration law. do not burn. And they were the one building that wasn't burned. So in a sense, my third dollar is for our speaker today and her immigration work.
Thank you, Martha.
Aaron, I have a
Yes.
happy buck.
Bill Murphy, hi.
Hi. I have 55 happy bucks today. On Friday, my wife and I will celebrate our 55th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
So she's done good putting up with me for 55 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And who's next? Speak up because we have 3 screens and I can't always find. Okay, if there are no other happy dollars, I'm so happy to have this great club, all of you here. That's just a real joy for me. So that's my happy dollar. And why don't we start now? Owen Johnson will introduce our special guest speaker.
Thank you, President Aaron. Our speaker today is a partner with Pop and Bullman, attorneys at law in Bloomington, where she exclusively practices immigration law. Prior to going into private practice 8 years ago, she was the director of the Immigrants and Language Rights Center of the Indiana Legal Services. And she worked for several years as an immigration staff attorney for that organization. She handles a wide variety of immigration matters, including all family-based immigration, naturalization, asylum, and other humanitarian statuses, removal, student-related issues, and many others. Christy graduated from Vermont Law School in 2005 and from IU in 2001, where she had a degree in Latin American Studies with a minor in Spanish. She currently serves as the American Immigration Lawyers Association Indiana Chapter Chair and on the AHA Board of Governors. She is also the facilitator of the Bloomington Immigration Justice Task Force, a local coalition that focuses on advocating for our immigration neighbors in Bloomington. Please unmute and give a warm Rotary welcome to Christine Pop.
Yay!
Yay!
Welcome.
Thank you, everyone. This is a very unique situation to be doing a Zoom presentation. When I accepted this invitation, I thought I would be seeing everybody in person. So it's unique circumstances. There's a lot to talk about in a very short period of time, so I thought I would sort of focus the key points I wanted to discuss on what's happened post-COVID, and then allow you guys to ask whatever questions you want. And hopefully I can leave as much time as possible because I get bored hearing myself talk, and I definitely enjoy having conversations more and answering questions that people have. I thought I would start with just kind of talking about immigrants in Indiana and who they are and where they come from. My statistics are about 4 or 5 years old, so things might have changed slightly within the last few years. But as of 2016 and 2015, about 5% of Indiana was foreign born. And of that population, a high percentage are college educated, around 30%. So the native born population in Indiana is about 25%, I think, 25% college educated or have a college degree or higher. Around 8% of business owners in Indiana are immigrants. And the countries that they come from, Mexico is the largest number, with 32% of the immigrant population in Indiana being from Mexico. India and China follow with around 9% and 8% respectively. Myanmar has the 5th highest at 2.9. And then there's just the mix of other countries aside from those. So Myanmar being Burma, and we have a large Burmese refugee population in Indianapolis and Fort Wayne. Around 110,000 of the immigrants in Indiana are undocumented, which means that they're at some stage in the immigration process. Either they have never had immigration status, or they had it and they've lost it. They may be in the process of applying for it, but as of the time that the statistics were created, around 110,000 had no status whatsoever. So that's Bloomington. I don't have any specific statistics for Bloomington in that realm. We have a bit higher of a Latino population per capita than other places in the state, but I don't really know exactly the same statistics here. But statewide, we're about 5% foreign born. So immigration, as you probably know, has changed a lot over the last 3 years. In fact, as of February, we keep track at the American Immigration Lawyers Association. We've been keeping track of all these changes. We have to know what to do next year to go back to normal. And around 700, well, actually more than 700 changes have been made to our immigration system in the last 3 years. So it has been a bit of a whirlwind to keep track of 700 changes to the law. Now, most of those changes have been made through executive order, which is just an order from the president, or through policy made at the agency level that has not gone through the official rulemaking process. Congress itself has made only a few changes. So most what we're talking about is not legislative at all. It comes from either the agency or the president, or through the courts, through court decisions. But all in all, there have been quite a few, and a lot of those have been very significant and fundamentally changed immigration in some really meaningful ways. You know, one major change that we've seen here in Bloomington and nationwide because of these changes is that fewer immigrants or fewer people are coming to the United States. The numbers of people applying for and receiving visas is way down, and this year it's even further down than normal. As a consequence, and I should say, the number of people applying for visas from abroad is way down. The number of people applying for any kind of status here in the US is also way down. So one thing that is very new, that as a consequence, our immigration services, USCIS, the Citizenship and Immigration Services, this used to be INS until the Department of Homeland Security was created, so now it's CIS. They have, for the first time, have a budget shortfall of around $1.2 billion. They are fee-based, so until this year, they've always been funded by immigrants paying their filing fees. And for the first time, they don't have enough money. They realized this in November that they were going to have a shortfall. And part of the reason is they've made it so hard for people to immigrate here that nobody's coming or they're being denied. And it's really, it's a big deal. The Citizenship and Immigration Services over the last 3 years has increased their staffing by 3,000 people. So they have 3,000 more employees than they did at the end of the Obama administration. And yet fewer people, far fewer people applying for services. We're seeing more rejections, more denials, and now when people are denied under a new policy, they'll be put into deportation proceedings if they don't have some other status. So these are just, over the last 3 years, this is just sort of a broad example of what we've been dealing with at the national immigration level. And I can talk about this forever if you have any specific questions, but I'm going to move to how coronavirus, what we've been dealing with the last couple of months, because things haven't slowed down for us. It's been crazy. As you guys know, starting in February, we started to see country-specific travel bans, starting with China and then moved to European countries and other countries throughout the world. And those bans are, for the most part, still in effect. But we've also pretty much seen a worldwide ban on travel generally. Many countries have shut down their borders in order to stop coronavirus. And then starting at the end of March, we started to see some really, really fundamental changes within the immigration system that I think will carry on for quite a few years. One of the first ones is that the consulates, the embassies that issue visas, they have shut down completely. I think there are people still working there. They're still making decisions and answering emails and doing that kind of stuff, but they're not giving visas except for H-2 visas, which are agriculture visas. So people who needed to come here to help in the agriculture services, those are the only people in the world since March that are getting visas still. As of yesterday, when I last looked, all of the consulates are still shut down, and it's not country specific. So New Zealand has not reopened, even though they don't have any COVID cases. I don't know if this is a part of a policy to decrease immigration or if there's some other reason that they've done this, but for whatever reason, the consulates are not issuing visas. And not even to people that were already in the process that had interviews or anything like that. In the United States, the Citizenship and Immigration Services also shut down at the end of March. And so since March, there have been no interviews except for some very, very, very few emergency interviews to get an immigration status within the United States. So all naturalizations have been on hold, all oath ceremonies have been on hold. And in an election year, this is a very big deal. Because in an election year, we usually see skyrocketing numbers of new Americans because people want to vote. And for me, this has always been a huge part of my business in an election year, is doing naturalizations and helping people naturalize. Immigration Services, since I've been practicing, has always expedited naturalizations and oaths during an election year to get as many people as possible naturalized into citizenship before September, when they have the deadlines to register to vote. But for whatever reason, USCIS has not tried to find a way to help people have their oath ceremonies. So in our office, we have 5 or 6 people alone who are just waiting for their oath ceremony. And nationwide, it's of course even greater numbers. They haven't done anything. This week, the offices are reopening, and we're going to see how that's going to go. They're taking all precautions necessary, which is good because we sit in really small rooms with several people, and you can wear masks and everything, but it's still a little nerve-wracking. They are starting to have some oath ceremonies, but very limited. So they're keeping the numbers at 20 people or fewer and moving forward. I wish I had pulled up the statistic, but I think around 60,000 people maybe every week usually would be naturalizing and taking an oath nationwide. So having 20 people at a time really cuts down on the number of people who are going to be able to take their oaths. The Immigration Services didn't have to do this. They could have found a way to do Zoom oath ceremonies or something, but they have chosen not to. So that's been sort of a controversy within the immigration law world. Another big change was at the end of April, the Trump administration signed a travel ban. And this was a travel ban that used, there's a provision in the Immigration Act that allows the president to stop entries into the United States if he deems it to be necessary for the protection of the country. This is what the administration used before for the Muslim travel ban that happened early on in 2017. Now the justification has nothing to do with coronavirus exactly. It's not for safety and health, but it's specifically for the labor market. This idea that allowing new permanent residents to come in will harm the economy as it's trying to rebuild. There is not a single statistic cited for how these people will harm the economy if they are allowed back in, but that was the justification for that. The ban applies to family-based immigrants, so people who are coming here to live with family, to have their green cards. Now, the immediate close relatives of US citizens, so the spouses, the children, and the permanent, the spouses, the children, and the parents of citizens who are over 21 days. Actually, sorry, scratch that. It's just the spouses and children of citizens. They are not included in this, but everybody else is included in this ban. So if you're a permanent resident, like one of my clients, and we've been waiting for 2 years to bring your son here, sorry, he's stuck in India. He's not coming over here. Likewise, if you're a parent of a citizen and you've been waiting a long time, like another of my clients, sorry, you're not coming here. The ban applied for 60 days, but it's pretty clear that they're going to extend it. What the ban did not apply to was foreign workers, which is very interesting because the justification for the ban was to help our economy by not bringing in new workers, but the foreign workers were still allowed to come in. That would be people on H-1B visas, L visas, and other non-immigrant visas. What's interesting about the travel ban is that the Trump administration ordered the Department of Labor and Department of Homeland Security and other agencies to review these non-immigrant visas, which are a very essential part of our economy, to see whether they should be subject to a future ban. And the feeling that I'm getting from listening to our lobbyists from the American Immigration Lawyers Association is that probably they are going to extend the travel ban, not just to families, but also to workers. And that would take effect in June. Now, right now, this is an entry ban. So it only applies to people entering the United States. It doesn't apply to people in the US who want to get some sort of status, but there's word that they are going to start the rulemaking process to extend this travel ban to anybody who's in the US trying to get some sort of status that would be in the same categories. One thing that would affect a lot of people in Bloomington is that they're thinking of extending the ban to students who have OPT, which is optional practical training. This is how a lot of students are able to work for a year or two after their studies have ended at IU, so foreign students. It's unclear whether that's going to happen. We don't know for sure, but that is something that we're watching. And it is a concern for us locally because we do have a lot of international students here at IU, and it's a big part of our community and also, I think, for income for IU. You know, not to get too political, but I don't think you can separate the politics from what's going on. You know, the President Trump has this aide, Stephen Miller. I don't know if you guys have heard of Stephen Miller, but he's been sort of a very essential part in a lot of the immigration changes that we have seen. And early on, when the debate about DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, was going on, the Trump administration proposed some new legislation that they thought would really get through, including a ban on certain family members coming to the U.S. Congress wouldn't go for it. They didn't pass this legislation. This is a runaround. The Trump administration has exactly done that, exactly what they had proposed before, but they've done it through executive order. And so many families, hundreds of thousands of families, are separated right now. And it's pretty intense, especially because it looks like this ban is going to continue. And finally, before to leave time for questions, I just wanted to throw out what's happening at the border. And what's happening at the border doesn't directly affect immigrants in our community, but I think it affects us morally, because I know for me, and I'm sure for some of you, many of us have felt that the United States is a place where we hold up and uphold human rights, where we are the beacon on the hill. You know, we protect people who are coming here seeking protection. The protections that we have been granting refugees and asylees, it's been eroding over the last few years. And what's going on at the border it's not new. But what happened after the coronavirus was that they no longer were accepting asylum seekers at the border. And in fact, people who have come into the United States requesting asylum have been sent back immediately to their country that they feared persecution. And there's some really horrible stories about young children whose parents sent them into the US thinking that at least they could be protected rather than staying in Mexico, which is what they have to do right now. And the kids were put on airplanes and sent back to Honduras and Guatemala without their parents, with nobody, back to their place where they were fearing persecution. So right now at the border, there's no asylum, even though we're required to under international law. And I feel very strongly about this because I do a lot of asylum applications, but it's pretty grave right now. For the last year, anyone who presented themselves at the border to request asylum has been sent back to Mexico, except for some very few categories of individuals. And many people, tens of thousands of people, are living in squalor in Mexico, and it's very dangerous there because there are dangerous communities along the border. So it was already a really bad situation, and now it's sort of been made worse by the absolute refusal to accept any asylum applications there. Individuals who are already in the United States are still allowed to apply for asylum. So the asylum process inside the US hasn't stopped, it's just at the border. Okay, so I want to leave time for questions. So I could keep talking on and on and on, but I'm just gonna pause there so that we can have the remaining time for whatever questions you have.
Thank you, Christy. Very good presentation, and thanks for your work. It's a wonderful service to the community. Do we have any questions?
Christy, how does this affect you emotionally?
And this is fair because you're here as a person, not just necessarily completely neutral about everything. Okay?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I have had to learn to do a lot of compartmentalization, I think. In my career, I've mostly done work with victims of crime, trafficking, and refugees and asylum seekers. And so I have had to deal with a lot of the sort of emotional trauma. It's a big conversation among therapists, but also lawyers that do this kind of work, that we do have to be on the lookout for secondary trauma. I think over the last 3 years, it's been so intense that I have had to do a lot of things for my mental health. Like I only watch comedy shows. I don't watch anything that's sad because I'll cry immediately. Meditate a lot and exercise. Like I went for a long run right before I got on here with you guys. It's really, really hard. It's really, really stressful. And I think a lot of lawyers, including myself, we go into this business because we want to help people. We want to fix things. And I can't fix things for many people anymore. And that's really hard. And it does take its toll. But I try to do what I can to help those I can, I guess.
Christina, does it matter which state you're in? Do states have different policies, or are some states more comfortable to work in than others?
So immigration is federal law, and if I wanted to, I could pick up tomorrow and go live in New Mexico and do the exact same thing. It's not state specific, but states do often pass their own internal laws that affect immigrants. And Indiana is not a good place for immigrants. We don't offer driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants, for example. We don't have in-state tuition for children who grew up here, but maybe were undocumented. So in many ways, Indiana's state laws are very hard on undocumented immigrants.
Thank you. You went to college in Vermont, to law school in Vermont?
I did, yeah.
Which law school?
It's Vermont Law School. There's only one in Vermont, yeah.
But in South Royalton.
It is in South Royalton, that's right. It's a little known fact, but I actually went there to do environmental law. And when I graduated, I started doing environmental policy for a couple of years. And then I decided I wanted to do more people-based law. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay,
What are all
Tim,
these?
and then Martha Wales afterwards. Yes.
Okay, my question is, what are all these 3,000 bureaucrats doing that they've been hired? Are they trying to keep people out of our country? And what's happened to the values of our country? Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. How much longer can we sit on the sideline and not do anything about this outrageous violation of our country's founding principles and values?
So you're speaking to the choir here. They're spending a lot of time denying and rejecting applications. And I'll tell you, they created a new policy this past fall where they now will reject an application for asylum or for victims of crime or trafficking if you neglect to put the letters N-A for not applicable in every single box, if you leave any box empty. And I have a paralegal who works with me, and we go over our asylum applications over like multiple times looking, is there NA? And every once in a while, there's like one hidden little box where we don't put NA and the whole filing comes back to us. So they actually are employing people to go through hundreds of questions to make sure that there is an NA in every single box. And if it's not, then they reject it. So they're just doing crazy things like this to make it really hard for people to apply. And people are giving up. I just had a client, a wonderful young man who was here, who's so smart, he's on the H-1B, and he just decided, screw this, and he moved to another English-speaking country, I won't say where, but because they had better opportunities for him and his family.
Sad.
So it is.
Terrible.
Martha Wales, did you have a question? You're muted, Martha.
Okay, can you hear me?
Great.
I'd like you to talk a little bit about fees, what they used to be and what they're proposing. And that has to do with the need to pay their 3,000 new workers plus the old ones in an era of fewer applicants.
The fees are outrageous. And you know, it's one of those things that as you have done something so many times, you just get used to it. So I just get used to saying these numbers, and I can't even remember what they were a few years ago. But right now, if you are in the United States and you're married to a US citizen and you want to get a green card, for example, your permanent residence through your spouse, those fees are going to be around more or less $1,700 total, just for the filing fees. That doesn't include legal fees if you hire a lawyer. That doesn't include your medical exam, which is a requirement. That's another $500 to $700. But just filing fees, you're looking at around $1,700. For naturalizations right now, citizenship, $725. They're thinking of raising the citizenship fee to over $1,000. So over $1,000 in order to become a citizen of the US, which is just crazy. But you're right, they're raising these fees partly to keep people out because it's part of the policy that we don't want low-income individuals in the US. I didn't mention, but in February, we have a new rule called the public charge ground, which basically excludes anybody who is of what the Immigration Services deems someone who may at some point in the future rely on public benefits. And they make this determination based on their country of origin, whether they speak English, their education level, nothing to do with who they are as a person or whether they work or any of those things. So they're making it, my point is that they're making it really hard for people who are low income or maybe from a developing country who doesn't have a lot of money to get status here.
And we aren't talking about the fact that many of these people who, for example, apply for citizenship have 3 or 4 family members. Because every time you have a family member, you pay the same fee. They don't just come along with you, or do they?
So sometimes people can do as part of their application process, and sometimes they can't. It kind of depends on your situation, but that's correct. Like if you're, in some cases, you might be paying that $1,700 2 or 3 times if you have a spouse and 2 children.
Right.
Yeah, there's no discount.
Any further questions?
I would like to ask Christy, what are your thoughts about the state of Congress? Are they just sitting on their hands, or are things so terribly polarized that they can't take any action? What's going on with Congress?
Yes, it is. It's terrible. I think the first couple of years that I practiced, when there were some movement toward comprehensive immigration reform, I got really optimistic, and now I'm totally cynical and jaded that anything would happen. But they do pass small laws that are kind of hidden in other legislation. So recently, as part of the defense spending bill, they passed a Liberian Immigration Refugee Act. So allowing Liberians who are here in the US to get their green cards, because we had a lot of Liberians who were here on TPS. So they do some things sometimes, but nothing comprehensive, and we really need comprehensive. As part of the CARES Act, they made a specific policy that every person in the family has to have a social security number for anyone to get stimulus money. So that meant a mixed status family where, say, husband's a citizen, wife is a non-citizen, is undocumented, they don't get any money at all, 0. So sometimes they do things that are really harmful, but for the most part, they're not doing anything.
So
Go ahead.
Okay, Jim Bright, this is actually for you too. Rotary is an international organization. Can Rotary play any kind of a role in this? I know it's political, but can't Rotary get its dudgeon up and say, this is intolerable. We are a country. We are an organization that promotes world understanding and world peace. Can we do something about it?
Charlotte, Charlotte, I would like to think so. As you know, the White House made a decision here also to disband funding for WHO. We have been working with the World Health Organization for 35 years to eradicate polio. There are a lot of issues. An opportunity for everybody tomorrow night. Rotary International President Ian Risley, who spoke at our club's centennial celebration in 2018, is doing a town hall on Zoom tomorrow at 7 o'clock, and we're all invited. I would invite you, Charlotte, to raise that question tomorrow, and I've got a few for him myself.
Okay, so I would be one of 10,000. I can try. Okay.
Christy, did you want to follow up on that?
No, I didn't have a follow-up.
And I would just ask, if I could, one more quick question, and maybe Christy, you're not the best person, but given what's happening with COVID-19 and other restrictions right now, how hard is Indiana University likely to get hit by international students who are not able to come to campus, to return to campus? I know of one Indian student in particular who was afraid to go home this summer because he was afraid the U.S. government would let him come back.
Sure.
Of course, there's so much that is really up in the air. But like I said, right now, there's no new visas because the consulates are closed. I don't know what it's going to be like in the fall, but I have the same sentiment. Like, I think the people who stayed here over the summer were very smart. I think it will be difficult to come back, but I don't know that for sure. But just looking at the way things are going, it could be really hard to come back. And then, like I said, the Trump administration might be trying to end the ability for students to work after they graduate. So that's another pool that brings people to places like IU with the business school and the informatics and all of that.
Thank you.
One last question from Bob Zaltzberg.
Yeah, Christy, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to tell us a success story. If you think about, yeah, I mean, it may have been a while, but talk about one of your clients that.
Okay. Well, I say that I do have, can everybody hear me okay? I think I had a glitch in my, okay. I do have a lot of success stories. Luckily, still today, I mean, we still, except for the last 2 months, have been getting decisions. So I don't know if you all know, but we have a pretty good size Uyghur population here in Bloomington in the Midwest. And so we've been able to get secure asylum for some Uyghurs. For that, that's always feels really good. And my favorite cases are always the ones where I am able to help somebody who needs asylum get asylum, or maybe a victim of domestic violence who has been able to move forward. And I've had several of those cases where I've taken people who were undocumented victims of domestic violence all the way through to citizenship. And I have a whole bunch of those clients, and it's just wonderful to see their life stories go from being really in obscurity and vulnerable to being citizens and being able to vote and support their families. And I just love that. It's the best part of my job.
Okay, thank you, Christy. Thanks, Bob. And thanks for the excellent presentation and for being here. If you have time to stay for a couple of minutes, we'll close the meeting, and if you have time to remain for a couple of questions, if anybody wants, would that be okay?
Yeah, I can stay around for a little bit.
Okay. So our club will make a donation in your honor to Centerstone, a United Way agency, for this presentation. And Ashley Sullivan will tell us about next week's program, I think.
Yes, we'll be meeting on June 9th right here on Zoom. Amy Marasavlovic of the Indiana Department of Natural Resources will talk about Next Level Trails, Indiana's investment in new trail funding. So be right here next week.
Thank you, President-elect Ashley. My thought of the week is from Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. In recognizing the humanity of our fellow beings, we pay ourselves the highest tribute. Then, please recite the four-way test with me. Of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth?
The truth.
Second,
is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill
and
better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And fifth, is it fun?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. I also want to note Clint Ball, Lance Eberly, and Kate Cruikshank are here. And I want to thank Owen Johnson for bringing in wonderful speakers and great guests and social media posts. So,
thank you for another
any more
great
questions?
program.
I have another question for Christy. This is Kate.
Kate, yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, one of the things I've been thinking about over the last 3 years is just, sounds like it's really simple-minded, but it's the idea that the legislative branch makes laws and the executive branch is supposed to execute laws. That's what executive is. It's not CEO, it's executing the laws. So one of the things that has puzzled me and troubled me over the last 3 years is the degree to which we aren't executing laws, but there's apparently space between the laws as passed and all the policies and all the minutia that can be developed, and that has totally sabotaged, in many cases, the intent of laws. So I've really been thinking about this, and I was curious about what Christy might think about how that's playing out in immigration law. I mean, we're in a situation where we have somebody proclaiming to do this, to do that, executive orders on all sorts of things that may or may not be contrary to what we understand to be the laws. And I'm trying to figure out, does that mean that we have to legislate every last detail to make sure that those kinds of things don't happen? I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to think about this. And so I would be interested in the perspective from immigration law.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to answer that, and I do have strong feelings about that. I mean, I think the most interesting thing about thinking about your question is that one of the things that President Trump ran on was the overuse of executive authority by President Barack Obama. That was actually one of the key things that he ran on. And DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, was one of the main points of attack because they said that was an overuse of executive authority. And yet now as president, he has issued more executive orders than anybody. I think part of the problem is that Congress is unable to do anything. I mean, one thing that makes our government somewhat efficient is having a Congress that passes somewhat vague-ish laws or broad laws and allows the agencies to issue regulations to implement those laws. And it can work well. It's not perfect by any means. The problem is that under this administration has been, and I'm sure other administrations, it's extremely politicized. One big issue in our deportation system, which is within the Department of Justice, is completely politicized, not independent at all. And so there's no independent review of immigration decisions until you get to the federal courts, which most people get to. So I think the way to solve it is to have a Congress that actually functions and can pass laws, of course, and to have a president perhaps that doesn't believe in having so much executive authority. But that seems to be where we're going, because if you look historically, presidents did not issue as many executive orders, but Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, it's just been increasing with each president until now. It's, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I brought this up was because I'm familiar with Birch-Bayh and Title IX, and everyone lauds how Title IX was passed. Title IX didn't have a chance of an iceberg in hell for about 4 years because it took that long for the Bayh staff in office to ride herd on the agencies that were supposed to create the regulations. And they ended up having to do part of it through litigation. That's a whole piece of what Congress is responsible for doing that we don't even really think about. I mean, you pass the law, but then you've got to ride herd on it and make sure that it's actually implemented, and you may have to go through the courts to do it. And in a way, I'm wondering if we don't need to educate our legislators to the point where they realize that's part of the package. You know, it's not just voting and then going out to play golf, but it's actually riding herd on things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It would certainly be nice. I mean, the agencies almost never issue new regulations in immigration. It's almost all through policy memos. To give you an example, under the Violence Against Women Act, which was passed in 1994, the regulations were passed a few years after that, have not been updated. Though the statute has been amended 3 or 4 times, the regulations have not been updated since the 1990s. They're non-functioning. We can't even read them to know what the law is. It's all a policy memorandum. So.
Yeah, yeah.
Are there more questions?
I have one. If Trump were not reelected, and leaving aside the coronavirus issue, how long would it take to restore some sense of normality to the immigration process?
Well, I guess the good thing about everything being issued through executive orders and policy is that you don't have to do anything to get rid of those policies. You just rescind the memo. And there doesn't have to be any rulemaking process or legislative process. Like I said, the American Immigration Lawyers Association is keeping track. We have a list of all of the 700 plus changes. And not all of, I mean, some of those have been through rulemaking and would have to go through the repeal process, but I think a lot of things can be changed. A lot of the grossly immoral changes that have been made by policy could be rescinded very quickly.
Okay, as we are a nonpartisan organization, I just want to make sure that everybody feels that they could ask a question that went in a different direction if they wish.
Yes, I don't want to offend anybody on either side, and I'm happy to answer questions on both sides.
No, and I was very glad that you talked about some of the history with executive order use, ratcheting up, you know, administration after administration. It's not a new a new problem.
I have a
Congestion.
question.
Yes.
I have another question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. And this is definitely a nonpartisan question. Thank you. I know over the years, I worked in some very underserved areas in terms of healthcare, Eastern Kentucky, Appalachia, and many, many, many of our doctors and medical personnel came from outside the US, a lot from India, but other countries as well. And though sometimes the mountain people couldn't understand them, they were so glad to have a doctor that they could go and see. Have these regulations against immigrants been relaxed at all for people with great educational background, training in medicine, law, other professions that we need in this country?
So the short answer is, at least under the coronavirus, no. There is currently legislation pending in Congress to make special rules for healthcare workers. The Healthcare Workers Something Act. I'm sorry, I don't remember the whole thing, but I can certainly send that out if you're interested. Healthcare workers have also been limited because they can't get visas to come here. It's very hard to stay here once you've gotten a degree, and many foreign doctors come here to go to medical school or to do their residencies, and then it makes it really difficult to stay. So it has not been made easier, and I think we could possibly lose a lot of our, a huge number of our nurses and doctors are foreign nationals, and tens of thousands of our healthcare workers have DACA, which is going to end at any moment from the Supreme Court. In June, it's going to be done, is what people feel. So it's really a problem. So there is legislation pending to kind of help with some of these issues. And it has a lot of co-sponsors as well, but it's bipartisan bill.
Thank you, Christy. Is there one more question? Okay, well, thank you for your time and your expertise. This is wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. As a recent immigrant, I'm so grateful for all of the work that you do and that all of you do to help us. So just want to thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it, folks.
See you all.
Thank you. And thank you all for staying a little later. Thank you. Bye-bye.